Hello, fellow risk takers, and welcome to my worst investment ever. Stories of loss to keep you winning. In our community, we know that to win in investing, you must take risk, but to win big, you've got to reduce it. Go to myworstinvestmentever.com and join our Facebook group to connect with our community of guests and fellow listeners. Fellow risk takers, this is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stotz from A Stotz Academy, and I'm here with featured guest John Osberg. John, are you ready to rock?
Let's do it.
Taking some time to get you on this show, and I'm looking forward to this episode. I want to introduce you to the audience. John Osberg's life mantra is serve to soar. John is on a mission to unlock growth in people, businesses, and communities to help them go from where they currently are to where they want to be. You'll find his posts on LinkedIn about mental models, transformative growth insights, and impactful content sources aimed at professional and personal development. He also showcases acts of egalitarian community building. And ladies and gentlemen, make sure to listen to him on his Power of Osmosis podcast. John, take a minute and fill any further tidbits about your life.
Well, Dr. Stotz, I'm going to call you Dr. Stotz. We had that chat off air. I appreciate this opportunity and your follow up with me. I've really enjoyed listening to your show. And so just want to send kudos to you for what you're doing to build this community and unlock insights for all those that are following, the thought leadership that you're putting out there. So big time kudos.
Appreciate
and thanks for that intro. That was fun. And I've been looking forward to this. So yeah, really the long and short of it for me, I grew up with two public servants, if you will, in the medical field, psychology field. So I got a front row seat growing up to what it is to really serve everyone, serve people selflessly, and to give, not, what I should say is give to give and not to get, right? So that's something that was ingrained in me at a young age. And here, 25 years later, I'm 30 now, I should say, but it's something that I just can't get away from. And so I started my career in technology in a startup. I had no idea what startups were, had no idea kind of what we were doing, but the folks that brought me in saw something in me that at the time I did not see in myself. So I'm super grateful to those folks for giving me my start and having the faith to work with me through the first few years of my, a little rawness, if you will, my greenness. So kind of launched my career getting into the startup where, a few times as any startup, we almost failed. This was a software development firm that was 3 of us when I started there. And then when I left 5 years later, we had about 40 people, multi-state, multi-million-dollar operation. It was pretty cool. So anyway, not to go too detailed, but basically 4 different stops in my career. The general theme was tech startups. So some volatility, a couple of things happened in my career that I guess weren't planned. I didn't see them coming, and put me into an interesting place around the middle and then into the end of 2019. So about 2 years ago, I found myself kind of on a bit of a slide, and was in a place that I couldn't really physically, or I should say figuratively and literally, recognize myself, Andrew, in the mirror. And that was what kind of was that final stop for me, where I didn't have I wouldn't call it a tier 1 trauma, which is, in my opinion, something like a heart attack or a DUI or something crazy where you're forced to make a change, right? You're like, okay, this is it. Like, I'm in jail, or I lost my license, or I killed, whatever. I had like a tier 2. So it was the step before getting somewhere really serious. And I knew that I needed to make a change. And so at the end of 2019, I decided to make some changes, things like abstaining from, drinking alcohol, and, a lot of other things that really just had to deal with personal development that as time went on, especially when COVID hit here in the States, it afforded me an opportunity to really go inward and spend time working on myself. And 60 pounds later, starting a business, running marathons, ultra endurance events, meeting people and becoming friends with people I never thought, I'd be becoming friends with. Some of these folks are fairly influential and just people who are of true moral fiber. Here I sit, we're into almost Q4 2021, where my life is almost unrecognizable from where it was maybe 2 years ago. There are still plenty of valleys and plenty of struggles, especially even lately, vulnerably and candidly, I've been working through. But my life is built on authenticity, which I know is one of the core principles of the show. So kudos again to you, Andrew. And just showing of really acts of selflessness, of leadership, of community building, and of transformative growth, which is something that I've went through and I'm grateful for. And so my steadfast mission is to help others, whether a business, a community organization, or someone individually, to unlock their own.
I like what you said about, I just wrote it down, tier 2 trauma. And it reminds me, when I was 16, I was heavily into drugs, and I was in a lot of trouble. And basically, there was a new method going around in America at that time, and it was called raise the bottom. And that's where parents were taught to let your child suffer the consequences of their action. In my case, I went to juvenile detention when I was younger, and I had a lot of different troubles, and I got kicked out of school at times and all kinds of stuff. But my parents kept trying to raise that bottom. And ultimately, I got into treatment, and I went through three different treatment programs. And then when I was 17, I got out, and I've been sober ever since, now almost 40 years, just celebrated 39 years of that. But I just want to relay a story. I went into a 12-step meeting when I was a young kid full of energy, and an older guy looked at me and he said, "I spilled more beer on my necktie than you drank in your whole life." and I just thought to myself, I didn't say anything. I just said to myself, "And what's your point?"
Yeah.
And
cool.
So when we talk about tier 2 trauma, I think the lesson I want the listeners to get, from what you've talked about, is that we do not have to go to the absolute bottom. And that's what I learned in my my life of kind of recovery, was that success is not about not failing. It's about catching yourself when you're slipping, catching yourself before you let yourself go too far down. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're in tier 2 trauma right now, you don't have to go to tier 1, and it doesn't have to get worse. You can stop right now and take action to reverse it. So thank you for that.
No, thank you. I'm glad you mentioned that, because, sharing that story again, part of that ethos, authenticity, and the vulnerable piece. A lot of times folks will say, I don't like being vulnerable. It's weakness. And I adamantly come back conversely and say, actually, it's the complete opposite. When you are willing to stand nakedly, right, and say, I am inadequate in these ways, you are the strongest you'll ever be. Because that shows that, hey, I don't care what people think. This is who I am. This is where I'm at. And yeah, it's not great, but I'm at least aware of it. And I'm working towards a solution of solving these problems. So kudos to you. And, in your last podcast, it was Jacob, was it Rogue? I know I asked you off there. I was listening to that and I heard you mention in response, but I don't think you went into detail. So it's almost like you're in my head, because I was going to ask you, as that podcast host, I can't help myself. Almost 2 podcast hosts having a chat here, but you did it. You already answered it. So again, that's beautifully said. And congrats on almost 4 years. I'm going on 2 years.
Fantastic.
Let's go.
My mother and I went out for dinner and celebrated that. So that was fun. So
absolutely fantastic. It really is.
Now it's time. It is time. No more waiting. It's time to share your worst investment ever. And since no one goes into their worst investment thinking it will be, tell us a bit about the circumstance leading up to it, then tell us your story.
Yeah, Andrew. I'm going to totally I hope this will get people really hooked in and listening to this, because this is not really planned. I mean, I have almost too many worse investments to count, whether they are financial or non-financial. What I would say to, the metaphor is, I wrote some notes down. I think investing in what others thought of me throughout my career. I would say probably, year 0 through year 5, 6, 7, investing in what others thought of me and saw of me, kind of my identity, and letting them kind of take over my inner voice, Andrew. That had to have probably been one of the worst investments ever. Things like, you're too young. You don't know enough. We need someone more senior in the room with you. Or, your energy is great, but you need to work on channeling it. You need to work on harnessing it. These are the things that still play back in my mind often, because really my energy and my youthful exuberance and my creativity are some of my greatest strengths. And it took, like I said, 7, 8, 9 years, a lot of soul searching to finally realize that. And again, to this day, there are times where I feel like, man, like, should I have this much energy? Should I be this, exuberant for this opportunity or for this speaking event? Am I overdoing it? And then I realized that those are those other voices that they have no place in my mind, in my brain. So I would say, metaphorically speaking, that's probably the best answer. And really, I guess, consequently then not investing properly into myself, into my true ethos. But financially, I will say this, when you're in the startup world, and this is something that really has been a hot topic for the last year or 2 years, because of starting my own business, and you really have to sharpen your focus, Andrew, as you might guess. And, with being a multi-business owner, you got to sharpen your focus on your finances. And I have not said this on any podcast or any online content until just this moment here. So this is my first try at it. I have made more financial mistakes than I can count on my 2 hands, and maybe even my toes. What do I mean by that? I was saying it just a second ago, that when you get into the startup world, a lot of times you don't have that stability. You don't have that establishment of benefits and 401k and IRA and all this stuff. So for the majority of my career, I didn't really have any of that backing, and I was flying by the seat of my pants. I also had some unique circumstances in my life where, when I did finally move out of the house, my family home, I just needed the newest, the latest, the greatest. I had the sweet car, I had the custom suits, I had the country club, I bought a boat once, and literally that would probably be dollar for dollar, Andrew, my worst ever investment, because I bought a boat and I probably used it 3 times over 2 years, and I probably set $30,000 on fire. So hopefully when this does get released, there's some people going like, wow,
don't buy that boat.
So yeah. Wow. Bust out another 1,000 BOAT. People joke with me. I'm like, oh, that's funny. And then I got it. And I was like, bust out another 30,000 maybe instead of 1,000. So, so I think I've answered a couple things, and I'd be open to the floor to anything that stuck out to you to go further on.
Let's talk about this. I like this, the thing about talking about investing in yourself and not, investing too much in what other people think and that type of stuff. Tell me, what lessons have you learned having gone through that and coming out of that and looking at that differently? What are the lessons that you've learned?
Well, one of the biggest lessons for me, Andrew, was now that I've lived, 30 years, right? Maybe call it 10 years in the business world as a careerist. The one thing for me is it's all about that next generation. So I really, even though I have so many mentors that the reason I am where I am today, I can thank them. I'm also a mentor to a lot of people. And it took some time to really fully realize that, probably because of those voices. You're too young. We need someone more senior. You have too much energy. I've been actively mentoring more people. And one of the biggest things I say, and this is a quote that I derived from just recently passed Trevor Moawad, who is was a mental conditioning coach, one of the best in the world, God rest his soul. He would say, if you're good enough, you're old enough. I'll say that again. If you're good enough, you're old enough, right? And listen, there are things. I grew up with a psychologist, right? So our brains don't fully fuse to about 25 years old. There are certain decision-making, cognitive things that happen. I get it. But I know plenty of 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds that are starting businesses, one of which in Buffalo, New York, she's 18 and she's a multimillionaire. And not to say that money is the biggest, whatever the word measurement of success, it isn't, but she's incredible and she's rocking it. And so for me, it's just realizing that we all have greatness in us, like the great Les Brown would say, right? Like we all have greatness in us. You have greatness within you. It's a matter of finding it, right? And maybe I'm not Tiger Woods on the golf course, and maybe I'm not Trevor Moawad as a mental conditioning or life coach or whatever, but I am something. I am someone, and I have something that can't be replicated. So the lesson that I take out of all those kind of concussive, your time will come, and what all these things I've said now a couple of times is, no, the time is here and the time is now. And if I take my shot, and sure, if I miss, well, at least I took the shot, and I'm going to learn from, making that mistake. But I'd rather do that than have it be theoretically presented to me saying, you know what, you probably should sit this one out because you're not, senior enough or experienced enough or whatever. I hated feeling, I'll finish this with this, Andrew. I hated feeling almost handcuffed sometimes in meetings and conversations where I was really just a fly on the wall. And while it was great to listen and take notes, I definitely, forewent, a lot of opportunity to sharpen kind of my iron in building relationships, building business opportunities, because I was just listening. And sitting there and not being able to be a part of the conversation. So, yeah.
Well, let me share a few things. I mean, I want to think about when I was younger. I was pretty insecure. I felt like I was a skinny kid, and I couldn't, defend myself against big kids. And I didn't really, I wouldn't say that women were attracted to me. Like I was just like a real ordinary guy, and I didn't see myself as anything. And I remember one of the counselors, his name was Roland Mena, and he basically said, we're talking 40 years ago, he said, we were in a group therapy session, he said, stand up in front of that mirror over there. And I was like, yeah. He says, look at yourself. He said, you're the tallest and biggest person in the room. And I was like, and I just never saw myself in that way, and it was hard to start to develop this idea that I could have my own identity. I could be who I want to be. I think my youth was not like about that. And then I built my great friendship with my best friend Dale, and we've been friends for years. But Dale's tougher. I mean, he and his brother. I was raised with two sisters, and a different type of environment. He was tougher, and one day we were in LA, and somebody said something, and Dale said, if you have a problem with that, that's your problem. I was like, you can think that way? You can say that?
Yeah.
And it's a little bit, I go back to the story of the guy that said, I spilled more beer on my necktie than you drank in your life. And what I now would say if I was in there, I said, I'm really sorry about that, sir, that you had to do that. Not a very good reflection, The point
and you
is,
know what that is, Andrew? That's sorry, I don't want to overspeak you, but that to me is a projection, right? No, I will definitely finish your thought, but that's just projecting insecurities and things on us, where we have to be, acutely aware at all times, where you hear things, see things, and have to ask yourself, is this person projecting something onto me that's within them, right? And don't take offense, because that's just their insecurity. That's their struggle, their problem. And I think in the world, if we took that approach a little bit, more seriously, I think that would help kind of lessen some of the tensions we see economically, politically, socially. So I'm sorry, continue.
Yep. My niece always said that, she said to me that, people have their trauma behind the scenes that nothing about. And that was a good reminder of that. But I think the other thing it made me think about too is I get young people who ask me about careers and all that. I was in Hong Kong and I spoke at an event, and a bunch of students came up to talk to me, and this one girl said to me, I want to study finance, but I'm in accounting, and I heard it's hard to make that transition or whatever. I said, who told you that? I don't know. So I heard it from who has the right to tell you that?
Right on.
And if you want to do it, and I say oftentimes I preface my advice to young people, I'm not really the best person to ask advice from, because I don't give a crap what you think. I'm going to pursue my life. I moved to Thailand when I was, 26 years old to just pursue my dream. So in some ways, you could say I'm selfish, but in the other way, you can also say that, I've tried to live my truth. And there's
Oh, I
one
love
last
that.
thing. There's one last thing I want to say is that I think about when I met a girl, a lady here in Thailand. She's a teacher, and I asked her, what do you teach? And she said, I teach, young kids that have ADHD. And, of course, I was, a hyper kid, and they put me on Ritalin when I was 7 years old. I didn't know that until I later found it out when I was, many years older. I didn't know how early they started me on it. I knew I was taking it as I was more aware. And basically, I said, how do you feel about it? And she says, I just feel really sorry for these kids, you know. And I just sat there and I said to her, and I said, you know, I'm ADHD, and I can tell you, I really feel sorry. I was in a room with 100 kids, and all of them sat and listened to the boringest teacher talk about the stupidest stuff, and they didn't move an inch. I feel sorry for them. I feel happy that I have the energy and the passion, and I jump, and I got so much in me that I just want to bring it out. And she's like, oh my God, I never thought of that. And I was like, right. And I said, and I've had it all my life, you know, and you know what I did? I hire people around me that are steady eddies.
Yes.
You know, so that I can go to my mountaintop, and then, you know, I'll crash, boom, and then I'll be out of communication for a little bit, and then I'll come back, and then I'll go to my mountaintop. And the point is that many people around me don't ever want to go to that mountaintop. They just want to be steady. So there's a place for all of us.
That resonates hugely with me. I just want to step back quickly, but I want to hit that point too. There's a great book for our listeners and watchers, What Happened to You by Oprah. It's recently released, I think, maybe in the last couple of years, and it's all about trauma. It's all about unpacking trauma. And that's the question we can ask ourselves when we are in public, or, you know, something happens, you see someone on TV is, you know, where someone's doing something that's maybe out of line with, you know, what you feel is appropriate, or, you know, along your principles, is what happened to that person? What's causing them to be this way? You know, again, even road rage as an example, Dr. Stotz, you know, someone zipping by, cuts you off, you know, what's happening to them, or what happened to them, maybe, because I've seen people where just the smallest thing, I love to study people wherever I go, especially driving, and you see just like the smallest thing sets people off. And there's an equation to that: caffeine, not sleeping enough, eating fast food, not exercising, watching the news constantly. I mean, it goes on and on and on, and it's you know, vicious cycle. But I want to go back to what you just said with, you know, you can be who you want to be. And it's something that I'm actually currently struggling with still. It's something that I'm working on, where it's like, you just said something there where I am also someone of vitality, right? That's another buzzword I love to use, is strength, energy, vibrance. And I can tell you're the same way.
Yep.
And it's like, I do want to be steady because that's self-preservatory, right? And meaning if you're constantly high energy, or you have these bouts of volatility of like high energy, and then you have to crash. So for me, in my case, that doesn't seem very sustainable for me. So I'm trying to find that balance, right? I feel like life, and I'm curious if you agree, is a constant beta test, right? We're just, even if it's super small, we're just introducing maybe a new behavior or a new routine to see, how does that do? Is that something that serves me, or does it not serve me? And it can also go, though, the too far, where it's like you're constantly changing things, and it can get overwhelming, and there's not a lot of predictability to life. So, but I love what you said, to come back to that. It just, we all can be who we want to be. And when you find that inner strength to just come out and say, this is me, that's where life gets really good. Yeah. That's where life gets really good, man, because you're just living, like you said, living your truth. Great phrase.
Yep. So that's, I think, you know, and for the lesson for the listeners out there, you know, we do what our parents tell us, we do what society tells us, you know, and there's a lot of value there, you know. I think it's an important thing to remember that if you are a person with a lot of energy, if you're a person that, you know, is like what we've talked about, you don't have to oppose everybody. You know, I always say that if you think on your own, use your own brain, you can come to your own conclusions. And I love that. You know, I love reading. I love talking to people. I love trying to figure out, how do I come up with my own, is there going to be inflation or deflation? Is the Fed going to do this or that? Is this company management going to be able to execute that? You know, in my world of finance, I love to think about these things. And I think the world of finance is so great because, you know, you can have all of your twisted, distorted beliefs and you can test them out on the stock market.
Right. There you go.
And you'll find the kind of consensus truth. And there'll be some small number of times in your career where you'll be right and consensus will be wrong, but most of the time, you know, and you can test. And the problem we have in our lives with a lot of things that are going on right now is that it's not easy for people to test their theories. And I think that's part of, you know, when I worked on my PhD, part of it, you know, a huge part of it is how do you test a theory? How do you try to disprove a theory? And so I just like the idea of being able to form your own ideas and form your own opinions, but it doesn't mean that you have to oppose everybody.
So good.
Yep.
That's so good.
So
I love that.
Let's talk about, you know, I want to think also about what you talked about, tier 2 trauma. And I want to think about people that are struggling, that are listening, and, you know, they're struggling to kind of, to become themselves and, you know, start to live their own, you know, passion and all that. And tell us, what one action would you recommend that they take to avoid suffering the same fate, or avoid suffering the same fate of having to hit some huge bottom? What can they do now, today, to make themselves better?
Oh, God, I love this conversation. That's a great question, Andrew. Thank you. There's a couple, there's a more philosophical kind of concept that I have that I'll come back to. I want to make sure I directly answer your question. And here it is. You're struggling to identify who you are, or to say you have a pretty good grasp on who you are, who you want to be, what you want to be doing, but you're still kind of unsure. Find your inner circle, call your inner circle, almost like a reporter. And you could even come out right up front. It's something that I've talked about in some of my coaching, and something that I'm working out with myself even. Call your inner circle, you know, Steve, you know, Nick, whoever. This is for me. Like, these are some of my buddies. Yep. You know, Steve, when you think of me, hey, you know, hey man, kind of maybe valence it a little bit. Hey, listen, I've been struggling to find my true identity and really my ethos, my life ethos. And I'm curious if you could give me totally candid, unfiltered, high level opinion on what do you think of me? You know, what do you, when you think of me, what do you think? Right? What are some of the words? What are some of the titles or the tags that you think, you know? And so what you can start to do is maybe compile some trends, right? So if I were to call my inner circle, they're going to say connector, they're going to say leader, they're going to say energizer, coach, you know, friend, you know, just an absolute diehard of a friend. I mean, my inner circle knows that I literally would die for them. I would do whatever it would take to help them, serve them, be with them, support them. And I know they would do the same for me. And that's why there's only a few of them. Right. So I would say that exercise of calling the folks that are your trusted advisors, your confidants, and speaking with them and say, what do you think when you think of me? As a person, as a professional, and start to write some notes. Yep. And then you can start to collect that. And then you can say to yourself, after you've had some time to just kind of meditate and maybe have some catharsis, okay, look at all these notes, look at all these descriptor words. What are the words in here that I want to be truly, without an agenda, without my job, without society? What are these descriptor words that really align with me? And then start to ingrain that in your brain. Right? Because people will ask, Andrew, when you're at an event, what's the first thing? What do you do? See my face there? You can tell I don't like that question. What do you do? Like, it's not what we do, it's why we do it. Right? So for me, it's like, why are you here? You know, why do you get up every day and do what you do? But I would say one last thing to that little bit of a rant is, whether we want to believe it or not, we are needed. We really are, you know, and that's part of that exercise with calling your inner circle, and even maybe your second ring of friends will help with that, because you'll realize that like you said with the mirror exercise, where you stand in the mirror and that was a light bulb moment for me.
Yep.
You can get caught up in just seeing, like your nose and your hands and your leg, and you don't see who you are outside of yourself, whether it's literally physically or I should say literally or figuratively. And you are needed. You are. You're a son, you're a daughter, you're a father, you're a mother, you're whatever, all these, you're a business person, you're a community leader, you're a coach, whatever it is, you're someone, you can be someone's idol, whether you know it or not. And every single day realizing that, and I've been coaching myself, Andrew, on it, because there's times where I struggle.
Yep.
And then people will just come out of nowhere on a LinkedIn message or a text or a call or in person and just say, man, I saw that post, or man, that podcast, or man, that thing you did in the community, last week, that really resonated, that really inspired me. And I went and did this or that. And I'm like, wow, and so just reminding ourselves constantly until it's just built. It's just built. It's just there. It's a mechanism that is always there and always working. Until that day comes, we have to keep finding ways to remind ourselves.
So, ladies and gentlemen,
it's a lot of words.
Yeah. Explore who you are. And then I would say, build on that, because that's what you're meant to be ultimately. And last question, what's your number one goal for the next 12 months?
I need to follow some of your footsteps there, Andrew, in building online digital courses that are around the ideas of transformation and magnetizing your life to bring in everything you want and then kind of dispel with what you don't. And that's part of that inward thought where it's like, I have some blocker that I'm still struggling to I know, I have these glimpses in my mind of man, I have done some cool things. And I know there are people who are out there who would benefit from this, but I keep saying, who's actually going to buy that digital course? Who's going to resonate with that? That little voice in there that just says, no way. So in 12 months from today, having a robust library of digital courses that are all about unlocking your growth on a variety of levels is the goal for me, is to really have that out there so people can, take little nuggets of whatever I've done, take it, dude, Bruce Lee, take what's useful, discard what's not, and then make it your own.
Yep.
So that's it for me.
That's exciting. And for the listeners out there, and also for you, John, as I've got 6 online courses that I've developed over the years, what I would say is, if somebody asked me about it right now, I would say, first thing you need to do is come up with your topic. Second thing you need to do is do an outline. Do an outline of, let's say, 5 topic points that you want to talk about. And then underneath each one of those, do a little bit more notes, right? And then get your iPhone out, put it on a stand, and turn it on, and say, this is module number 1. And there's 5 modules in this course, but I'm going to talk about this one, which is X, Y, Z, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. And then you go through the 3 bullet points or so you have under that, and you turn off your camera after 5 or 10 minutes, and you record the next one until you've got 5 of them, each of them, let's say 5 minutes. Who's going to give you 25 minutes already to watch 5 of those? 25 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, there's your course. Put it up on a site. I use Thinkific, but whatever you use, put it on the site, offer it for free or for $10 or $5, and say, here's what I got to give, and start to drive people to it, get feedback, and then start to say, part number 4, I'm going to rebuild a little bit. Part number 1, I'm going to rebuild, and just do it. You can create a course in a weekend and have it up and running. And that's my advice after spending thousands of hours creating courses. That's what I would say to the listeners, but also to you, John.
Wow. So, I'm very grateful for that. It's on air coaching that is not taken lightly. I'm super grateful for that. And the one thing that I was just about to say, the one thing you did that I used to really not do well is to keep it simple, right? And it's not keep it simple, stupid. I like to say, keep it simple, silly. So the KISS model is something that's been top of mind now for a while. So that I have that all recorded here, and I know this will come out. So once it's released, I'm going to go watch this part like 10 times and then create that course, and I'll send you the first copy.
Perfect. And what I always say to the people around me, I like to say is, let's not insult ourselves. the world's hard enough on us. So instead of saying keep it simple, stupid, keep it simple, silly, let's say keep it simple, smarty.
Hey, even better.
Yeah,
I went from stupid to silly. You took it from silly to smarty. I love it.
Yep. So
That's good. Well done.
Let's support ourselves. Well, listeners, there you have it. Another story of loss to keep you winning. Remember to go to myworstinvestmentever.com and join our Facebook group to connect with our community of guests and fellow listeners. As we conclude, John, I want to thank you again for coming on the show, and on behalf of A Stotz Academy, I hereby award you alumni status for turning your worst investment ever into your best teaching moment. Do you have any parting words for the audience?
I would just say keep serving to keep soaring. You know, when you serve, that's what helps you soar in life.
Amen. And that's a wrap on another great story to help us create, grow, and protect our wealth. Fellow risk takers, this is your worst podcast host, Andrew Stotz, saying, I'll see you on the upside.